I am in Munich, Germany at the Lenbachhaus, an art museum that is home to the largest collection of works by Der Blaue Reiter, or the Blue Reiter group of artists, including Vassily Kandinsky, Franz Marc, Gabriele Münter, and others. The museum is located inside this unusual Florentine-style villa house right in the middle of Munich. The Lenbachhaus was built between 1887 and 1891 for Franz von Lenbach, a popular late 19th century portraitist who became especially beloved by Hitler and Goebbels later on. It is a magnificent villa and has been expanded upon many times. The city turned the artist's eccentric home into an art museum in 1924. The modern wing, which opened in 2015, was designed by Norman Foster, who also designed the glass dome of the Reichstag in Berlin. The centerpiece of this new edition is the Wirbelwerk, a fantastic spiral installation by Olafur Eliasson. The vortex-like sculpture hanging from the ceiling is composed of hand-blown polished metal tubes. Alright, on to Der Blaue Reiter, which was a short-lived but crucially important artist association that existed between 1911 and 1914, based right here in Munich. The artists and editors of the Blue Reiter presented works representing stylistic diversity, providing equal value to both representational and abstract forms. Through a quote inner necessity, they helped to open the eyes of this equal status in the arts world just before the launch of the Great War. Der Blaue Reiter started with an almanac, compiled by Vassily Kandinsky and Franz Marc in May of 1912. The almanac featured a variety of local and foreign artists, offering a platform of new art and ideas on how expression can be visually expanded. This is Kandinsky's study for a cover of that first almanac. There is a massive collection of reverse glass paintings made by different Blaue Reiter artists and friends from their circle, including several made by Kandinsky, Münter, and Heinrich Rambold. Reverse glass painting and East Asian woodblock prints were highly influential upon the Blue Reiter artists. Alexei von Jawlensky also collected and traded Japanese woodblock prints, and introduced Münter and Kandinsky to the traditional techniques of reverse glass paintings. There is a circus by Auguste Macke. That is Kandinsky's cow in Murnau. He would even paint the frames of many of these. And this is St. George III. Here are some samples from Franz Marc and Auguste Macke's personal collections of ukiyo-e Japanese woodblock prints. Here are some Japanese-inspired woodcuts made by Kandinsky. And these are Franz Marc woodcuts. The one on the right was a postcard he sent to Kandinsky. Like many of their contemporaries in Europe, the Blaue Reiter artists were fascinated by exoticism. Clearly Japanese art was a big inspiration, but also African art. This is Kandinsky's African Improvisation 6 from 1909. This is a portrait of the dancer Alexander Sakharov by Alexei von Jawlensky. He was a Russian-born expressivist who moved to Germany and became involved with the future Blue Reiter artists. Franz Marc sculpted the mortar and pestle and cup, along with the belt buckle and decorated keyhole fittings in bronze. This is the Little Oak Tree from 1909 by Marc. That is the Turkish Cafe by Auguste Macke, painted in 1914. Sadly, Macke was killed just a few months after painting this in September of 1914, the second month of World War I, while fighting on the front in Champagne, France. These are Indians on horseback near a tent. Macke was quite fascinated with American indigenous culture. He did probably see one of the Wild West shows that were being performed in Germany and across Europe at that time. These of course romanticized the American Wild West. He was also inspired by the stories of German author Karl May about the American West. Some Native Americans were brought to Germany during this time and displayed as exhibits in a zoological park, which was more so a human zoo in Hamburg-Stellingen. Der Blaue Reiter also found tremendous inspiration in folk art, especially traditional forms of Bavarian folk art and Russian folk art, since many of them were Russian expats like Kandinsky and Jawlensky. They considered regional folk art as natural and authentically rooted in the people. Macke even wrote an essay criticizing art museums for not displaying folk art. This is The Cow by Kandinsky. a scene that appears to show some onion domes from his homeland of Russia. While living in Moscow as a young man, Kandinsky was trained in lithography and printmaking, so during the first decade of the 1900s while living here in Germany, he often worked with woodcuts before developing his fully abstract improvisations. This is a still life with figure 2 by Gabriele Münter. By the way, Münter gave her entire collection of art to this museum. She had all sorts of her own work, along with those of Kandinsky's and their other friends. She had to hide all this art during the Third Reich, and then from the Soviet occupants who were looking to repatriate art to the Hermitage. This is a still life with Russian blanket by Münter. These are 2 Easter eggs with depictions of Christ resurrected by Marianne von Werefkin, who is actually a daughter of Russian nobility, but she entered into a relationship with an army officer, Alexei von Jawlensky, and trained him in the arts. They both moved to Munich in 1896, thanks to her significant pension, which would be cut off after the October Revolution in Russia. Münter painted on this glass goblet. Kandinsky came to Munich to study art in 1896, and he ended up teaching at the Phalanx Art School in 1902, where Gabriele Münter was his student. Kandinsky was married at the time but promised to divorce his wife, who is also his cousin, for Münter when their relationship got serious. They lived and worked together for about 10 years during this period, but they ended their relationship in 1916, as Kandinsky secretly married a different woman. Münter never gave him back all of his paintings that are now on display here, so he never would have seen any of these again. Here are some more reverse glass paintings by Münter and Kandinsky. Reverse painted glass and other types of art glass have been a long-standing tradition in Bavaria, so they were following a deep local tradition when making all of these. Kandinsky was a very spiritual Christian, and that is often reflected in his works. Sometimes he would create more apocalyptic scenes based on old German biblical imagery. This is All Saints 1, painted by Kandinsky in 1911. The Blaue Reiter artists also followed the bourgeois phenomenon of escapism that was popular at the time. This is The Little Monkey by Auguste Macke. He painted several scenes like this of zoo animals, zoological parks of course being a temporary escape from reality for city folks. Franz Marc sculpted this bronze panther in 1908. Here is the Zoological Garden 1 by Macke from 1912. The Little Monkey and Man by Franz Marc is great. Franz Marc viewed animal painting as a search for purity and primitiveness. Here is Macke's Milliner Shop. This is The Walk on the Bridge by Auguste Macke from 1913. It looks like this painting has not held up too well. And there's a seated female nude sculpted by Macke. That is The Promenade by Macke from 1913, an oil on cardboard painting. He had met Robert Delaunay the year before, and that experience changed his perspective and understanding of the role of light and color in painting. And here are children with a goat. The next room has a unique display on the Kinderwelten, featuring the artwork of children. Kandinsky and Münter collected over 250 drawings by children. Several are on display here. Such drawings actually inspired and guided the professional artists. In the almanac, they published some anonymous children's drawings, making the argument that the anthropological line of artistic development from children's art to African sculpture and folk art, then European art at the top, was inherently problematic. Kandinsky wrote that, quote, "The child is a stranger to practical purposes, as it looks with unfamiliar eyes, and still has the undimmed ability to perceive the thing as such." This is The Railroad at Murnau by Kandinsky. These are the red flowers on a pink table by Alexei von Jawlensky. He would sometimes copy his young son's drawings like he did here. This is a 1909 painting by Kandinsky called Horses. Children apparently draw a lot of horses. This is A Girl with Toddler by Maria Frank Marc, the wife of Franz Marc, who is also an artist. That's another work of Marie Frank Marc, Toys with Birdcage. Some Gabriele Münter drawings, which are quite similar to a child's drawings, are displayed next to some antique Bavarian folk art toys. This is Impression 6, Sunday, executed by Kandinsky in 1911. There were 4 essays on contemporary music in the almanac, including Kandinsky's own essay titled On Stage Composition. With that, he critiqued Richard Wagner, arguing that he did not go far enough in dismantling the boundaries between the arts with this concept of the Gesamtkunstwerk, the total work of art. The essay was complemented with Impression 3, The Concerts, which was painted after Kandinsky and Marc attended an Arnold Schoenberg concert in Munich in 1911. The painting is inspired by Schoenberg's atonal music. Arnold Schoenberg was one of the most important Viennese composers of the early 20th century. His style was a bit different, and he was friends with many expressivist artists. The composer himself also made paintings like this one, titled Satire. Some of his works were displayed at the first Blaue Reiter exhibition. The 1912 almanac featured artwork from various cultures and times shown on equal footing with European art. For example, they include a picture of an Easter Island head and other non-European art next to their own artwork. There's an 1890s traditional demon mask from Ceylon, present-day Sri Lanka. It is juxtaposed with a portrait of Kandinsky at a table made by Gabriele Münter. This is a musically inspired drawing by Kandinsky, titled Lyrical, which was featured in the almanac. This is Kandinsky's Improvisation 18 with Tombstone from 1911. Here's a work by another early German expressivist, Wilhelm Morgner, called The Woodworkers. The Blaue Reiter almanac featured 7 pieces by Henri Rousseau, who is considered as the father of naive arts. Here is a facsimile of La Noce, the wedding painted by Rousseau in 1908. The real one is at the Musée de l'Orangerie in Paris. There's an Aztec Chipa Totec, made sometime before 1510 in European contact, displayed alongside Gabriele Münter's Dragon Fights, made over 400 years later. Returning again to Bavarian reverse glass panels, here are some historic pieces from the 18th and 19th centuries, next to Heinrich Rambold's St. George from the early 20th century. On the left is a 19th century portrayal of St. George that was owned by Münter and Kandinsky, and next to that is Münter's still life with St. George, which actually features the painting displayed alongside it. There is an altar with a Madonna of Sorrows made by Gabriele Münter in 1908, next to a still life with Madonna figure from 1910. That is Franz Marc's Tiger from 1912, a fantastic piece with bright colors and sharp shapes. This is definitely influenced by the Italian futurists that you would have known much about. It's displayed alongside a much older Japanese print. On the right is a Chinese print of Fabulous Beasts, next to Franz Marc's Fabulous Beast, and that is The Archer by Vassily Kandinsky. Gabriele Münter bought a house in the small town of Murnau in southern Bavaria, which is quite close to Oberammergau. I have been to the Passionspiele there. It's a really scenic region. In 1908, Kandinsky also moved there. That house is a crucial locale for the whole Blaue Reiter group, as the other collaborators would often hang out there with them too. So this gallery is packed with Murnau scenes. Here are some by Münter and Alexei von Jawlensky, as he and Marianne von Werefkin would often stay in the Murnau house. Here is a great view of Murnau by Kandinsky made in his first year visiting there. This is a summer evening in Murnau by Alexei von Jawlensky. Here is a grouping of Murnau scenes by Kandinsky and Münter. The Münter house in Murnau, where she did live out the rest of her life, is now a museum, so I would definitely like to visit that sometime. This is Murnau with the Church 1 by Kandinsky. Of course, there are some more reverse glass paintings. All of these panels feature something related to Murnau and typical Bavarian life at that time. This is the Footpath and Houses at Murnau by Vassily Kandinsky from 1909. These are Kandinsky and Münter's paintings of Koschel, another wonderful town in southern Bavaria that the Blaue Reiter artists would visit. Actually, Franz Marc lived there and is buried there. Koschel is now home to the Franz Marc Museum. There's a portrait of Jawlensky and Werefkin by Münter, painted during one of the couple's joint stays at Murnau. Here are 4 more little paintings made by Kandinsky in Murnau. That is Autumn by Münter. There are some traditional grave crosses by Münter, next to a still life with cat by Auguste Macke. Here are some more Macke works. He lived for a time near Murnau at Tegernsee. That is the landscape near Murnau by Alexei von Jawlensky. This is a work of Jean-Blois-Nislet, a Swiss artist who is friends with many of the Blaue Reiter members, especially Franz Marc. There's another bronze by Marc of some horses. If it wasn't clear already, Franz Marc mostly painted animals, especially horses, but he would feature other creatures as well. For example, this is Deer at Dusk. After their first day in Murnau in 1908, the progressive artists founded the New Artists Association Munich, or the NKVM for short, to start up modern art exhibitions and programs. However, their exhibitions here in Munich were not popular. Eventually Kandinsky, Münter, and Marc left, and would start Der Blaue Reiter. These are works by Alexander Knoldt, who would become a magic realist and new objectivity artist. Adolf Erbsloh was another expressivist. He was elected as the new chairman of the NKVM after Kandinsky left to found the Blaue Reiter. Here's a piece titled Munich Before the City, a cityscape that Kandinsky used to go against the academic standards of the city's institutions. And that's the interior of the dining room from 1909, presumably of the Murnau house. This is a study for improvisation number 2, The Funeral March. Here visitors can compare and contrast the still lifes by Alexei von Jawlensky and Gabriele Münter. This is Maturity by Alexei von Jawlensky, who used vibrant colors in these mystical portraits. They're really unusual and display direct influence from his friend Henri Matisse. This is Into the Night, one of Marianne von Werefkin's most important pieces. This is a 1910 abstract dancer by Vladimir Berliuk. There is The Circus by Irma Bossi, an Italian painter who was involved with the NKVM and would stay in Murnau. The Blaue Reiter was unique among the other expressivist groups at that time, as they took a somewhat spiritual approach to opening up the possibilities of abstraction, which many of the texts Kandinsky and Marc wrote for the almanac supports. A placard here states that a central role is assigned to the inner quality, which acts as an indicator of a genuine work of art across all epochs and lands of origin, and independently of whatever outer form it displays. This is Kandinsky's Berg or Mountain from 1909. And this is Improvisation 26, also called Rowing, made by Kandinsky in 1912. Now this is a truly iconic piece, Franz Marc's Blue Horse 1. Since their group was named the Blaue Reiter, the blue horse was a common motif. The color blue was important to them, as it was considered the color of spirits. And the Blaue Reiter symbolizes moving beyond. Vassily Kandinsky actually painted the original Blaue Reiter painting in 1903, which features an abstract man riding a horse. That painting is in a private collection, though it would be really great to display here. This is another great work by Marc, The Deer in the Monastery Garden, a confluence of Cubism and Futurism. Another great example by Franz Marc from 1914 is The Birds. Marc was drafted into the German army in 1914. He would actually be assigned to paint tarp covers in pointillist style to hide artillery pieces from aerial observation. Sadly, Marc was struck in the head with a shell splinter at Verdun in March of 1916. At that time, an order had just been put out to withdraw the artist from combat, but it did not quite reach him in time. Here is Improvisation 19A by Kandinsky, painted in 1911. This is a romantic landscape from 1911. Notice the riders riding blue horses. There's also a green horse for some reason. And here is St. George 3. Presumably he is fighting a dragon, though it's a bit too abstract to make out. The final room is about the two exhibitions of the Blaue Reiter, held in the winter of 1911 in conjunction with the third NKVM exhibition at the Tannhauser Gallery here in Munich. Der Blaue Reiter showed about 50 works in total at that first exhibition, 43 were catalogued, and the exhibition toured to several other European cities until the outbreak of the war. Here are some pieces by artists that were shown in the exhibition, as well as some of the original artwork from it. This is a reverse glass portrait of Henri Rousseau by Franz Marc, whom he greatly admired. Only Robert Delaunay represented the French Avant Garde in this exhibition, but here's another Rousseau facsimile, La Basse-Cour, French for the chicken yard. Here is a picture with cow from 1920 by Heinrich Campendonck. He was also a member of Der Blaue Reiter. And this is Campendonck's Forest, Girl and Goat from 1917. This is yet another fantastic work of Franz Marc, the cows in red, green, and yellow. Here's another Native American scene by Auguste Macke, a 1911 piece titled The Indians on Horseback. This painting was displayed in the first Blaue Reiter exhibition. Here again they put asterisks on the word Indians, and provide contextualization on the historical use of that word. Macke's interpretation of American indigenous culture is interesting. This is a drawing by Robert Delaunay of his favorite subject to abstract and deconstruct, the Eiffel Tower. Delaunay gave this drawing to Kandinsky for his mediation in the sale of 2 paintings by Rousseau and Bernhard Kohler. These are reverse glass paintings by Kandinsky that were displayed at the first Blaue Reiter exhibition. This is the Water Pipit by Jean-Bloet Nisle. Nisle's work is quite different from his friend Franz Marc's. This is Deer in the Woods 2. The first version that we saw earlier was featured in the 1911 exhibition. This Dark Still Life by Gabriele Münter was shown in the exhibition. This is a study for All Saints 2, the composition with saints made by Kandinsky in 1911. The Swiss artist Paul Klee became an ally of the Blaue Reiter and a very close collaborator with Kandinsky later on. He sketched this miraculous catch of fish in 1913. Next to that is the Garden of Love, watercolor number 3 by Kandinsky, which was displayed in the second Blaue Reiter exhibition in 1912. 2 drawings by Auguste Macke flank Franz Marc's horses. It is sad that both of these extremely talented artists became casualties of the First World War. Here are some more drawings by Münter and Kandinsky. That's the Harlequinade by Albert Bloch, who was the only American artist involved with the Blaue Reiter. Here are more illustrations by Paul Klee, who was the most prominently represented artist at the second exhibition with 17 works. The theme of that one was black and white. Here's a sketch by Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, who was involved with a different expressivist group called Die Brücke, based in Dresden, but his work was published in the Blaue Reiter Almanac. Marie Frank-Marc painted these flowers and yellow thistles in 1913. Here's another work by the Missouri-born artist Albert Bloch, titled The Munich Houses with Tower. He lived in Germany from 1909 to 1921. This is Flowers in the Garden, Clivia and Geraniums by Auguste Macke from 1911. Those are self-portraits by Elizabeth Epstein, a Russian artist who became involved with the Blaue Reiter. Actually, she introduced Kandinsky and Marc to each other in 1907. And there is yet another Kandinsky improvisation. So the Blaue Reiter gallery is fantastic. I think it's great that this permanent retrospective exists on the crucially important modern expressivist group, which also emphasizes how they had long-lasting influences on artistic developments after a short lifespan expired. There are some other galleries here at the Lenbachhaus, but I kind of had to rush through them. Here is The Orphan in Amsterdam, a realist work by the German artist Max Liebermann. I was surprised by a fairly good collection of French Barbizon school painters. For example, these are small pieces by Jean-François Millet. Here are the Black Rocks at Trouville, as portrayed by Gustave Courbet in 1865. There is also a large tree study made by Corot in the same year. And there's a fantastic piece titled The Wheat Harvest by Charles-François d'Aubigny. There's also a more modern gallery in the modern wing, with some ugly highlighter yellow placards. In case you didn't see enough Kandinsky or Marc, here's some more, along with a piece by Robert Delaunay in the center. This is the Study for Composition 7, made by Kandinsky in 1913. While all the pieces displayed in the Blaue Reiter galleries were from that period, here's an example of Kandinsky's later works, in which he adapted all sorts of geometric shapes and figures. The Centre Pompidou in Paris actually has the largest collection of Kandinsky works. Here are some photographs by Dorothea Lange, taken in the United States during the Great Depression. And finally, this room has some classic Ellsworth Kelly panels. So that was the Lenbachhaus, an awesome museum affording an in-depth look at Der Blaue Reiter and the artist that spearheaded the organization and its ideals. I would absolutely recommend visiting this museum while in Munich. It is located right by many other art museums such as the Alte Pinakothek. Speaking of that, I do have other videos featuring attractions here in Munich, like the Alte Pinakothek. That is linked in the description. Also, I have videos featuring all sorts of locations across Europe and America, including many other art exhibitions and museums. Also, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to my channel for more. Thanks for watching!